If I had my druthers, I would contact John Jakes and I would ask him to be an expert witness in one proceeding. But I would also contact Dave Mustaine from Megadeth and ask him if he would be an expert witness in another proceeding. See, when I was a newspaper editor for Streetwise newspaper, there was a period of time where the Chicago operations were expanding to Washington, D.C. They were considering opening up another location in Washington, D.C. and doing Streetwise in D.C. There was at least one issue that was produced. And the people in Chicago actually did some of the work concerning the issue for DC. And one of the things I did is I provided a interview of somebody I did over the phone. I interviewed him over the phone because he was part of the headlining of a concert that was happening in Washington D.C. to help the homeless. His name was Dave Mustaine, and he was the front man for a band called Megadeth. Now, I did not have the appreciation for Megadeth at that time that I have later acquired. I'm going to be honest with you. I had a, shall we say, an aesthetic appreciation in terms of the kind of musical comportment for others, including others associated with the band he had formerly been a part of. And I found the band, while he was a part of it, to be some of my favorite music, including during the first Gulf War, by the way. Just so you know, my first introduction to heavy metal was two heavy metal cassette tapes I borrowed from some boys who were threatening to beat me up and kept harassing me. One of them even hocked a loogie on my fucking hand one day. And something, they kept talking about these heavy metal tapes that they had. And looking at them, they got a new tape, they were listening to it, they wore these heavy metal t shirts. I was more interested in trying to address matters with these guys named Brahms and Bach. But at that point, something said, you know what? They're really interested in that. And I'm looking at the pictures on their shirts, and these are some really compelling scenes. What do you think would happen if I asked them if I could borrow the tape? So one day I just went up. It was a strange thing, I guess you could say. I'm used to getting bullied by these guys. And I just went up to them and I said, hey, can I borrow your tapes? Can I borrow some tapes so I can listen to the music? Maybe, maybe I might like it. And they said, okay. So they gave me two tapes. One of the tapes they gave me was Kill 'Em All. Yeah, Kill 'Em All. But no, sorry, Master of Puppets. Master of Puppets by Metallica. And a tape by a group called Sacred Reich called Surf Nicaragua. I took it home. I had my cassette player. I was listening to these albums. I was listening to this music. I was stunned. Not only was it the percussiveness, but I read through all the liner notes. I read through all the lyrics. I'm like, this is not music. This is like a story. It's like history. It's like history in a poem form with music. I think it appealed to something tribal in me, but I wasn't supposed to know about that. Nobody had ever told me that that's what that might be. But I read through it and I'm like, this is a story. And then thinking about contemporary events, Iran Contra, Vietnam War, war on drugs. So I went back and I was like, hey, and I started telling them how I understood the lyrics. Next thing you know, they weren't beating me up. I ended up listening to a Megadeth album sometime later. I remember the song was Peace Sells, but Who's Buying? They had this kind of cool intro, but I didn't really know, to be honest with you, there was a particular kind of way that he put songs together. I didn't prefer as much as the other ones, to be honest with you. And his voice had this kind of scratchiness I didn't like so much. But later, I'm like, what? Are you serious? I mean, I had enough respect for him in the genre. It was like a very heroic moment to like be able to interview Dave Mustaine and then to actually interview him. And I believe everything he said was 100% authentic. And it was a really amazing experience to hear him discuss his experience and his understanding of what it was that had him provide the support he did for that concert. It also provided the support for that show. Now, here's the problem. We're down the road a bit. If I'm not mistaken, it would have been 23 years ago. Right? 23 years ago? Maybe 24? Did Dave Mustaine and the guys from Megadeth know that they were a part of MK Ultra? And not only did they know that they were a part of MK Ultra, did they know that what they were doing was being surveilled so that it could be used for paradigms connected to weaponization for actual military weaponry. Did they? Because let me tell you, I've been tracking some of the stuff and some of the way that some of those things come up. I believe he was a very prescient person. I now have a respect for his music and for him as a political participant in a way I did not have the experience to have an appreciation for at the time. But I also believe they specifically and intentionally used his understanding of what was an appropriate manner in which to convey social critique and challenge the status quo around consciousness of exploitation, including exploitation attempting to compel people to concede to accepting massive crimes. I believe they used it for completely contrary purposes than what he would have supported. Did he know? How did he acclimate? What did he do? I also believe that it's possible that through some of the things that him and people like him do, that it is possible for certain people that are specially gifted to be able to engage in processes of transmutation, including potentially transmutation that has to do with decontamination of sites that have been toxified, including in connection with exposure to radioactivity. I've been used as a human test subject in these regards for most of my life. I know I can do it. I know I already did. I know I got certification in specific techniques on how to do it, right? But somebody else wants to say that it's theirs and that they're going to use that in connection with a re-up on a bunch of fucking contracts they've been working on my ass for the last 10 fucking years. Well, I'm not allowed to talk to anybody. And I'm not allowed to get copies of the newspapers that I used to write for, including as an editor, where I got to interview guys like him. Did you guys hook up a telemed on that phone interview between Charity Kraus and Dave Mustaine for Streetwise newspaper? Streetwise DC? How many of you motherfuckers in Washington, D.C. right now that say you're qualified to represent yourself as a representative of the people are on that telemed? Some good shit, isn't it? And it's not fucking yours. To be honest with you, if it were up to me, there would have had to have been standards. You would have had to have had practical experience in order to qualify.